Going live. Good morning, everyone. Welcome to another INTEA breakfast. It's been, 2 weeks, which seems kind of long now. But yeah, some time ago, if you remember, we had bi-weekly breakfast. This season we're doing quite often. We'll also breakfast next week, so stay tuned. If you're watching this in record, then yeah, don't miss it on Friday, the December, what is it, 2nd?
Second.
Yes. Hi, Ravis. How are you? Long time no see. And I apologize for my light blinking from time to time. Just don't mind it.
Yeah. Hi, everyone. Hi, Sergey. Good to see you after, 2-week pause, a break. So what are we going to talk about today?
Right. We wanted to talk today about the adaptive learning. I think it's a buzzword that keeps coming up, and like it's in articles and in blogs. When we talk to clients, they are like, does your LMS do adaptive learning, or is this course adaptive? And there has been a lot of, well, not really misunderstanding, but I think a general vagueness around that. One thing that Ravis and I, when discussing this topic, we actually couldn't decide, like, are we talking about personalized learning? Are we talking about adaptive? Is there a difference? And what's that? Also, just one thing I'll just to move it out of the way. When we talk adaptive, sometimes this term is used for content that sort of adapts to different screens and devices. So kind of mobile adaptive or device adaptive. Sometimes it's also called responsive, mobile ready, and so on. We're not talking about that at all. We're not talking about devices or any like shape or form of things. So that's something else, and I think just calling it adaptive when it adapts to small screens and shows bigger buttons, and adapts to large screens and shows more content at once, that's totally different story. Shouldn't be called adaptive at all. We can call it responsive, mobile ready, mobile first, mobile second, whatever. So what we are talking about is the kind of learning that defies the one-size-fits-all approach, right? So when we take a book from a library, we kind of all get the same book, right? So we read through the book, it's the same content, but when we are going through an e-learning course, it doesn't have to be, right? So the actual content that we read can be different. It can adapt to us, but we'll actually get back to that. So what we're going to talk about today is, well, first of all, what things can adapt to what, why it's very, very cool and useful if your course is not the same for everyone who reads it. And we'll also talk about ways how you can make it, or us and you can make it, but without investing in super expensive, complex setups, a lot of development time, or buying platforms that kind of do it for you, and so on. And finally, we'll probably talk about kind of a few myths or things that salespeople can tell you that might not necessarily be true, or even if they are true, then not useful. So that's the agenda for the next half hour. Strap in. So first of all, Bravis, I know you've done your research on personalized versus adaptive. Tell me, because I'm like, honestly, I'm confused.
I think I'm more confused now than I was before, because I kind of felt that there is a line between adaptive and personalized, a meaningful line. After reading a couple of articles, starting from Wikipedia to some authors talking about learning, I would say people try to define these two things, but it's like talking about that adaptive is more like about technology and process, and personalized about the person's learner's perspective. But in the end, it's so hard to talk separately. It's one of those things. It's like, electromagnetic field. It gets electric, it gets magnetic, it gets magnetic, it gets electric. So I would say that it doesn't really matter some even call adaptive personalized and vice versa. I think it doesn't matter. Nobody can clearly define it. The key idea is anyways that there is a component, I would say there is a kind of the learner experience component, which might not be necessarily technological. It might not be driven by the software you use, and that there is the kind of technological side to it, right? Is it on the course level? Is it on the LMS level? Is it on, some kind of infrastructure, wider stuff level? So I would say, if we want to talk about this meaningfully, let's not, talk about these small things and terminologies, but let's say, yeah, it's adaptive and personalized, or just call it adaptive.
All right. It makes sense, and I feel that if you do want to make this difference, this angle of, talking about personalized as related to people, kind of, and having the people angle, while adaptive is more like the technology angle. So that if you want to draw this line, I think it's possible. But yeah, I have the same feeling, and especially annoyed by articles which use the terms interchangeably, probably just for search engine optimization, and yeah, that like makes even less sense.
Yeah,
right.
My favorite article was that stated adaptive versus personalized, and I read it through, and there was no and it was
No
never
comparison.
compared. Yeah, it was never compared in the article. So people kind of, it's stupid. I think it's somebody trying to sound smart, and then start talking about terminologies and stuff. In real life, what you want your learner, if you treat him as a client, to be happy, and that leads to adaptability or personalization.
All right, so with that out of the way, let's talk about what can actually adapt, because one obvious thing that we were always used to is that content kind of adapts in the form of let's say, not showing certain content to certain learners, or showing extra content to some learners. And I started thinking about that, and I thought, like, even my book example, it's not true. So imagine if you took a book and it was the same content, but parts were highlighted, for example, right? So if someone gave you the book and said, look, I read through it, and there is like, you should be really interested in chapter 2 and 4. And when you're giving it to someone else, so you say, okay, you should be interested in chapter 2 and chapter 6. Yeah. So what adapts is not the content, but adapts the attention, the effort we make, right? So that already is useful. And then I thought, how can we do that in a course? And well, that's super easy. You just do a pre-test. So here's the first thing, if you want to adapt learning, you don't need to create some testing system that hides certain parts of content from people. You just make them pay less or more attention to different parts, right? So let's say before the course, like typical learning is what you give somebody, an hour worth of learning content. They read through it, they watch the videos, they do the exercise, and in the end you have a knowledge check, right? So 20 questions, making sure that you really have read it through as an honest person, and also that you really understand and remember it and you didn't skip anything important. So if we reverse this and just put the test before, we'll find out that some things are obvious to some people or just familiar from previous experience, and some things aren't. And then we can just match, if the test is not just random, just dragging different facts from different parts of the course, but if it's matched to different parts of the course, it can just say, well, okay, you've done very well on chapters 1, 2, and 3. Chapter 4 and 5, you failed completely. Please read those in more detail. And the other chapters, you've done okay. So the person will automatically kind of adjust the limited attention that they have, the energy at the time, to the things that you really want them to learn. And it's way better than they kind of try to get through spending at least equal, but maybe sometimes even more amount on things that they already know, because they feel kind of safer, familiar, easier, or maybe they are more interested in those things. If this is a course on, let's say, ecology and sustainability, we talk about sustainable energy and sustainable farming. I might be more interested as a technical person in reading on sustainable energy because it talks about solar panels. I love solar panels, but the farming, like, I'm not really interested. Whereas my attention should be completely reversed, right? So to help me do that, put a test before, ask me questions, find out that I know nothing about farming, and direct me to do my job and better, and read about the farming part, not the technology part. So that's an easy way to do, but what you have to be careful is that the test really covers all the content, and then there is direct match between the feedback to the test questions to the content, right? So I don't have to kind of do the matching myself to the content that I have not even read before, right? So you have to do a little bit of pre-work to that to really guide me on this journey. But in essence, it's just as simple as putting the test in front of the course. So
yeah, and then you can knock yourself out by, I would say, the depth of automation, and algorithms, and how sophisticated you want to do that. I would add, Sergey, that having pre-tests in the beginning is a good instructional practice as well, from the point of helping the learners to understand that there is some unconscious incompetence, right? And that is especially important, I would say, even more with soft skills than hard skills. Because usually if you ask me a question, do you know how radio works? I can it's easy for me to assess it. Do I know it, or do not know how it works, more or less, or how do you know how a fridge works, right? It's hard. It's easier to understand if I'm competent or not for the learner. Whereas when we talk about soft skills, I mean, we all think we're good salespeople if we have a title of sales executive, sales specialist, or things like that, and so on. So therefore, I would say that this is also good just as instructional technique. And then the least you can do to make the learning adaptive, and this is what I personally been fighting for years, is really showing to the experts that just making the training, kind of just getting rid of a locked navigation, it's already first step to adaptability.
That's
the best adaptability
true.
engine is actually the learner. I mean,
there's a ton of ideas how to use artificial intelligence to make content adaptable, so that parts of it hide, parts of it show, parts of it contract, parts of them may expand, part of videos are replaced with text or vice versa, and there's an AI behind that, whereas you actually have human intelligence right in front of your content that will adapt. And we always assume that our learners are doing everything in good faith, right? So I think we've been talking about this for years now on Breakfast, that learners like to learn, they want to do their jobs better. If they don't want to do their jobs better, that's kind of problem with the HR and recruitment rather than with training. And if you give a person who wants to do their job, or wants their job to be easier, or wants to earn more money, or get promoted, or just go home earlier, whatever, if you give them content that helps them do that, they will consume that content gladly. If you give them content that does not help them do that, and kind of often stands in the way of them doing their job, they will not be happy about that content, right? So you have to kind of look at the content first and what you're giving, and whether you're helping your learners and treating them as customers. And if they're not buying your learning, in a sense like of devoting their time to it, might be a problem with your learning. So we've covered this at enormous length, I think, over the past number of breakfasts. So I just wanted to quickly show this slide here. If you can see that, type in chat if you can see it. So it just reminds me of this thing that there are things that we don't know. Like some of you might find out that you know, when talking about sustainability, right? It's not just about climate change, for example, but also about ethics and, you know, peace on earth or something like that. That's a huge part of sustainability. And you're like, whoa, never thought about that. Or, of course, because I just made it up, I didn't have a good example, but that angle, you know, of things that we don't know that we don't know, the discoveries part is important, and you have to kind of, the pretesting really helps to do that. All right, so another part of adaptive content is that
it's not only about content, right?
What?
I was saying that it's not only, adaptability is not only about content. So we should look at the concept wider, I think.
Yes, absolutely. It's actually our brains adapt to different things. So if you give someone an exercise, it takes them 5 minutes to do it, even if, I don't know, a physical exercise, a mental exercise, and then next time it takes them 4 minutes to do it, you know, to fill out a form, right, or to reload a coffee machine, right, or anything, you know, work related. So the more you do it, the easier it gets, right? You adapt to the task. The problem with learning is that it's not very repeatable. So you cannot, like, rarely can use this concept of, hey, you do this quiz 50 more times and you become very good at it. It's kind of, you either have to have like 1,000,000 questions and it seems like a huge waste of time and so on. But there are things which are work related, which can be repeatable. One of the examples that I know we worked with a bank and they had a hotline for people applying for credit cards. And when you apply for a credit card, you might be interested in, like, is it really free? So if I like overcharged by 1,000 euros, do I have, like, how much do I pay back if I return this money in a month or in the same month, or if I return it in a year? It says, you know, 5% on your advert, so how much will I really pay, and stuff like that. And people had to be trained to really quickly answer those questions. Of course, they had a certain calculator to help them answer those rather complex mathematical problems. And they were trained to, like, their sales technique was that they would ask people about specific amounts that they had in mind, right? To put it into a real perspective, like, you know, if you, like, what amount of money would you like to borrow? So person's mind immediately goes to, yeah, on that phone, it's like 800 euros. So yeah, what about 800 euros? How much would I overpay if I give it back, you know, over 6 months? So the hotline operators, they did a lot of math using a calculator, but the calculator is complex because, you know, it's credits and, you know, it's always complex. So we've created a copy of that calculator that would essentially just asking questions like instead of a customer. So it was programmed so that, you know, it always comes up with random numbers. And sometimes it asks you, how much will I overpay? Or if I want to overpay this amount, how much can I borrow? Or if I want to pay this amount of money, how quickly should I give it back? And so on and so on and so on. And it was just randomized. So it would throw in the random figures at you, and you could do 1,000 tasks like that. So instead of, like, writing 10 quiz questions, we wrote one little engine that could create unlimited number of different tasks, and people were supposed to get through, like, I think 20 questions in 10 minutes with like I think even 0 wrong. They really were strict about that. So you could go through this test and it would not complete your course in your LMS until you were able to do that. And typically it took people under like 30 questions to start getting it really right. So that is an example of adaptive learning where the learner adapts to content, right? So they become better. And I think you had a couple of examples that I forgot about what other areas outside of credit calculations.
Yeah, I mean, Yeah, with math, it's obviously with math, it's easier because you can create those engines where it's generated randomly, but we can go beyond that. In my experience, we had similar simulators that would train people to notice flaws for one producer of electronics, that basically people will be shown a lot of pictures of kind of what it's called some insights, kind of the motherboards of that equipment or something, and then people have to notice that something was not done properly there by the robots, and again, it means that basically you were saying that kind of the learner adapts to it, but at the same time, what we are fostering here is that the learning experience is being adapted, because somebody learns certain things faster, somebody is very experienced, so for them it just takes one go. Yeah, I'm kind of 100 out of 100 noticed. Another example is, of course, aviation and, for example, luggage scanning. I mean, of course, the robot notices, certain substances, certain thicknesses, certain things there, but still people always double check it. They double check the screens. There's a person just watching the telly. Again, you can train them. Some of them are more experienced, need less training. Some of them have better eye on stuff.
Yeah. Also, it's easy to do those things. So, because
Yeah.
I remember like years ago, we were talking to, I think, an Israeli company. They were just discussing similar simulator to us, so, where you would see actual images from an actual X-ray machine just randomized in front of you, and you had to click different parts, that seem suspicious to you. So it was like super simple. But now I'm thinking that if you take a couple of images and you layer them over, right? So you have let's say 3 layers, like bottom, middle, and top layer of different things that can be in a bag, and then you start randomizing them, turning them around, and each layer will have like 10 different images. You quickly end up with, well, roughly 10,000. So it's like 10 to the power of 3 plus the rotations. You quickly end up with like 10,000 different images. You don't have to do them in real life. They will all look different and randomized enough for you to do your 100 scans before you start getting everything right, stuff like that. So yeah, again, so the other concept is that people adapt to content, and you can create, like, you can think about, hey, what can we turn into an infinite exercise to train people like we train them in a gym, right? So a lot of times your content, when you kind of talk about something and you check whether people remember it, you don't really train them. So if there is this training part, you might want to add that as well. So I think it also falls under adaptive learning a lot. But on this note, I wanted to also mention, I see a lot of software today that promises randomizing, like creating software, creating quiz questions automatically based on the content you have. And I want to refer you to a breakfast we've had about creating quality questions. And the main idea of that breakfast was that a good question in a quiz and a knowledge check after a course does not ask you about facts. It asks you about concepts and situations, right? So if you've done a course on workplace safety, right, you should not ask people like how many types of extinguishers there are, right? Or how many types of threats you can identify, or what is the regulation number that governs the office safety in your country. Whereas the bot, the automation, will try to create those questions. Like, it asks you about minute details, which means nothing. The good questions will say, okay, you are in a kitchen and the coffee machine catches on fire, and you have like three options. Like, do you want to like grab a pot of like just a teapot and like throw water on this? Do you want to run for the extinguisher? And then what kind of extinguisher do you grab, like the big one or a small one, stuff like that? Or do you just unplug it first? Or like you create that stuff, which helps people to put them into real situations and apply the knowledge that they've had, which almost takes it out of the quizzing area into a scenario area, which is my favorite area, as everyone knows. So automated quiz writing, which becomes really a thing, and it does. I've seen examples. It does really good quizzes, but they're good in the sense that they make sense. They ask about correct facts and provide different answers to that, but they ask the wrong thing, right? They concentrate on details. No one cares about whether you remember facts. You can always look them up. It's important that you know what to do with those facts. And a good test will test you on that. And a good course, of course, will train you to not just know facts, but be able to apply them to make decisions in your job. So yeah, that software, but will help you generate 1,000 questions is great, but in the end, it's not very useful. I hope it makes sense.
No, absolutely. This was what I was about to say, Sergey, that exactly there is this temptation to use things like that, but you shouldn't do that. And what I would like to add about adaptive learning, what I find important are two aspects. For things to be adaptive, you have to start much earlier than that with two important things. One is really defining very, very high quality learning objectives. Maybe not for the learners, maybe not, to put them on the slide, but for yourself. You have to be very clear that if there is this big topic, it can be split in very clear, granular, not too broad learning objectives. Then you can add granularly, again, content to it, right? Because adaptation, very often, if we talk about content adaptation, it's this linkage between understanding what the user needs and then give it to them. And if your content is kind of quite messy, it's very general, it will be very hard to pinpoint where to guide the learner, irrespective of what kind of technology you use. So it all, as always, content is the king, and it's kind of inevitable, but it starts there, right? And this is what we have done in the past, I would say, very successfully with some of our customers. One of them is being a big bank that big bank with a K, we started to work a lot on the compliance training being adaptive, because the sheer amount of hours spent annually by every person on compliance was so big. It's so many hours. I don't know the figure, but I would just say 80, 120 hours a year. That was clear we have to optimize it. And then the adaptive learning came as a solution. Of course, and it's not only for the learner. I mean, it's a lot for a lot of business gain. And what they started to do now, they kind of measure after people have gone through this adaptive training, one topic, they go adaptively. They measure how many hours they have saved. So they see those people who have spent less than, what would be the full training, going through all of the content, they measure it, and it's a kind of a KPI for them now. And this is how they talk about this.
Look, it's interesting. So previously our KPI was that everyone has to see everything. And it's like,
and the more hours you spend in training annually, the better. So we do 40 a year. Yes, let's make 80. And now it's kind of reversed. You're right.
It's kind of ironic, but also makes a lot of sense. And it's actually a good place to start if you're thinking like, well, this pretest, like I have to do, let's say, pretesting. I have to do like what we were discussed earlier, also mock exams, right? So if you are training people for certain certifications, you just give them the fake certification at first, and they identify their own shortcomings. You might also help them highlight those shortcomings, and then you have to actually have the content in this modular form, and it has to correspond to this test, as I explained before. So it's a lot of work, kind of as compared to normal approach of, okay, let's create an interesting story-based course and explain everything, and then check the knowledge and move on. So it's a bit more effort, as all new approaches are. So if you're looking for kind of where to apply that first and foremost, I would say that you have to look for the most time-consuming courses, and also try to envision which ones would really benefit from not showing everything to everyone. I think that it can be anything, like sales skills course. Yeah, I'm pretty sure a lot of people know some basic things about sales and can just skip that, but it's typically not a huge course, right? So compliance can be like a good area for that. Security, I'm not sure. Like some people will say that it makes sense to repeat things even that you do know. So it depends, but yeah, it's
Product training,
looking at hours saved potentially is the bigger the course is, essentially the easier it gets. So yeah, kind of on kind of approaching towards the end, I think in the things that we've highlighted with you for this conversation, we have one really cool idea. So far, for the whole half hour, we've talked about using people's knowledge as the guide for adapting the content, right? Whether it's like direct adaptation, where you ask people questions and the content hides and shows based on what they know and don't know, or highlights itself or not, or whether it's just guiding people's attention to different parts of your content. But we also can input things outside of human knowledge, right? So we can also do the adaptability of the content based on things like management feedback. It's a separate system, but if we can look into that, we can find that your employees value you as a manager 10 out of 10 on this scale, 9 out of 10 on that scale, and suddenly 6.5 on this scale, right? So maybe you want to look at this specific content, or when you're doing your big management course, some things might be highlighted there. You can also bring in sales performance, like your average margin on the products that you're selling, or your number of sales that you do, and so on, to help you kind of guide you through a certain training. If you're doing product training, right, there is a whole new line of Apple or Samsung or whatever products, and we know that historically somehow you're not very good at selling accessories, and you just sell the main thing. So maybe you want to look at that range a little bit more, because we know that, and it's somewhere in the database. Of course, it comes down to quality of the data, whether you actually have this data, and on your ability to extract this data and use it inside the course. On a technical level, that's typically not a problem at all. On organizational level, can be different. And then you can really have fun with different KPIs, like number of emails you send per day, right? So
talking about constructive communication, right?
Yeah, in the course on constructive communication, right? So like if you don't send any emails, or like you send one email per day, you're probably a very constructive communicator. So yeah, let's unlock navigation, let you look at things that might interest you. If you send 500 emails a day, then probably you need to read the course in full entirety, and every chapter is important, stuff like that. Yeah, we're joking, of course, but today it's quite possible to bring in any sort of real life metric into learning, so your content can adapt based on that, right? Just it would be fun to do something like related to zodiac signs. What do you think?
I mean, there are endless possibilities, but actually I would even say that we have to look at this on the learner's experience level. And I'm not talking about previous job experience, in a narrow sense, but as you were saying, with these emails or with any other things the learner does in the digital and in the physical space, we can use that data to guide learners. I mean, this is similar to what, of course, every every social network, every digital company does these days, right? They know what you're doing on the internet, they know what you're interested in, even to the point, that old story that the artificial intelligence predicted that a person was pregnant before she knew, just by the way her shopping pattern. I think it was Tesco. I mean, just by looking at what kind of product she's interested in, they started offering products for pregnant women because
it was Target. It's a famous case about
yeah, it's a
American
very famous
Target.
case. But here it's why I'm bringing this up is because this is a similar kind of approach, and this is kind of similar idea that we can personalize experience based on so many different things. And the technology is there, the X API. I don't think we have to talk about it in detail here. It's a separate subject, I think, but still, this is something to explore because now the tools supported, the LMS is supported. So it's, I would say the biggest challenge, as you said, will be organizational, to get your IT on board, to show them the importance, and basically to talk early to them. It's so,
And it's
as
also, it's about planning ahead, right? So you have to
yeah.
really kind of understand where you're going, so it's not an afterthought at all. But it's right there. I would say that having a course that one size fits all, and you just have to read through it, get a test out, and so on, is like, by today's standard, is a super basic approach. And if you kind of think in your head, like, if this course takes X amount of minutes times Y amount of people, if we save, I don't know, 30% of that by just letting people know which parts are really important and which are not. And obviously those parts are different to different people, because if there is a part that is not important to anyone, don't include it in the first place. But if you think in those purely mathematical hours saved terms, you'll find content that really needs adaptability. And on a technology level, it's super easy to do. Like we said in the beginning, could be as easy as flipping the knowledge check and the content around, and then just making sure that the content corresponds to the knowledge check properly, so people can guide themselves, and that's it. So a little rehash will go a long way in terms of saving you hours. And again, sure, letting go of the mentality of 100% of people have to do 100% of stuff, and the more they learn, the better our job. Probably not true anymore as well. So
Finally,
I think what we can do now is just to advertise our next breakfast. The link is in the chat, but just
next Friday. We're going to talk about gamified video project. It's a case that we would like to discuss because that's really cool. It kind of brings together so many buzzwords. I mean, the video, the gamified,
scenarios.
Yeah, scenarios. I mean, we really kind of have it all there.
Culture training.
And culture, soft skills. I mean, it's
internal marketing.
That as well. Yeah, in the end, you see, it's a little bit of a teaser, but in the end, kind of, we started it as a learning project, but I mean, in terms how we produced it, in terms of what was produced in the end, it's kind of more of a marketing product, with of course the learning component. But I think that the whole approach was, I felt like I'm working in a marketing agency, like 100%. I think
actually, kind of again, another teaser. We did involve a marketing production company to work with us on that project, which was like really cool, because the quality that was required was absolutely kind of big adverts level of video quality and everything. Okay, well, we'll tell you all about it, but we've done a very cool video game or like video-based scenario game with a very cool customer here locally in the Baltics. We're ready to talk about it at length next Friday. And for now, I hope you've learned something about adaptability of your content. Maybe it's not as scary anymore or as unclear anymore. Let us know in the comments. So don't forget to subscribe to this channel, and yeah, see you next Friday.
And we always forget to mention our blog, so also a Google for INTEA blog, because all of our breakfasts are being transformed at some point into blogs that you can share with your colleagues, with those who do not like watching YouTube videos but better read it, you know. Also use that maybe, yeah, also to deepen your kind of understanding of things. So yeah, thank you everyone. Thanks for joining, and see you very, very soon.
Have a great weekend. Bye-bye.
Bye-bye.